The Retirement Cafe podcast, episode 57, being Age Proud and Aging Better with Louise Ansari. Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Retirement Cafe podcast, which is brought to you by Retirement Planning Specialists, MFP Wealth Management. Now, you may have heard the first two episodes in our series about changing perceptions of aging a couple of weeks ago. Well, we're back with episode 3 in the series this week. If you missed the first two episodes, then head to our website, theretirementcafe.co.uk, to take a listen. Firstly, I chatted to Dominique Afajan in episode 53 on the 12th of November about her book, Bolder, Life Lessons from People Older and Wiser Than You. And then in episode 54 on the 19th of November, I interviewed Maggie Bigot about how to age joyfully. So back to today's interview, and I'm delighted to welcome Louise Ansari from the Centre for Aging Better. The Centre for Aging Better is a charity working to create a society where everyone enjoys a good later life. And Louise is the charity's Director of Communications and Influencing. She joins me today to chat about the charity's projects and her new book, When We're 64, Your Guide to a Great Later Life. Welcome to the podcast, Louise.
Great to be here, Justin.
So, Louise, tell me a little bit about yourself and your background and how you got involved with the Centre for Aging Better.
Yes, well, I've been a communications director for many years. I've worked in health communications, and I worked abroad for a while with the Foreign Office, and I've worked in local government and lots of basically kind of public service, public sector organisations. And I worked in diabetes prevention for 5 years before joining the Centre for Aging Better. And like most people, I kind of vaguely understood that, you know, people were living longer and healthcare was getting better, and sort of vaguely understood the idea of baby boomers. But then since joining the Centre for Aging Better around about 3.5 years ago now, I've had quite a big shock in terms of my understanding of the absolutely seismic demographic changes that have been going on for about 40 years and are kind of starting to reach their kind of natural results in terms of a couple of things. The first is that obviously we're all living longer. Most of us are living much longer than our parents or grandparents, 10 or 15 years. And the second thing is that the baby boomers, people who were born between that quite long period between 1946 and 1964, are all now in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. So the combination of those two factors means that the population over 50, there's already about a third of the population are over 50. And by 2030, 40% of the population are going to be over 50. So that's 28 million people will be over 50. So if, you know, it's not kind of them over there, old people, it's going to be half of the whole population. Yeah. And the implications that that has got across every area of society and life are huge.
Absolutely. So there sounds like there's a need for the Centre for Aging Better, but what do you look at obviously aging better is a kind of key term here. What do you view as the real problems, and what is the centre's kind of, you know, what's it trying to do other than age better? But what does that really, you know, if we drill down to the specifics of that?
Yeah, so absolutely. What does it mean to age well? When we ask people that, and we've done a couple of really big surveys and really kind of dug into what people themselves think about what a good later life would be for them, they all say very similar things. People say very similar things. They say they want good health, and they say they want financial security, and they say they want good social connections. So really good relationships with friends and family. And those are the kind of top things. And then there's a whole raft of other areas. There's, you know, the kind of house you want to live in, the kind of community you want to live in, what are you going to actually do with your life, to keep it having meaning and purpose? Do you want to work for longer? How are you going to kind of realize all the lovely things you always wanted to do, your creativity, your hobbies, travel, spending more time with friends and family and so on. But health, financial security and relationships are the kind of key things that people want. And we at the Centre for Aging Better are trying to influence systems like the health system, like the labour market, because for financial security, a lot of people will need to work for longer, and like things like community infrastructure, physical design of space, so that people can, for example, get around, so that transport could be better and facilitate better relationships. So
Mm.
quite a lot needs to happen across housing, the labour market, the health system, community design, and a whole raft of other areas to enable people to have that great time, good health, good financial security, and good relationships.
Sure. So if we drill down even further, then obviously health is a key thing. Everyone wants to be well, but tell me about the kind of policy influence that you're having at the moment, or you're trying to have around health.
Well, for example, on the industrial strategy grand challenge on ageing, one of the grand challenges of the strategy, is one of the key pieces of the government's kind of domestic programme, the previous government's domestic programme.
Right.
One of the things that they believe, for example, is that new technology and innovation can help in terms of people's health and mobility. And they've just announced a £97 million fund for innovation, and we've drafted the framework for that in terms of what we think health innovation could be for later life. And it
Mm.
isn't all about gadgets and gizmos, it's actually often about focusing on prevention of long-term conditions, for example, so service improvement. But it's not all about funding new hospitals. It's often the most important things are about helping people stay mobile for longer, have good strength and balance, for example. So we'll do things like talk to civil servants and ministers, try and influence government policy. And we've also, with Public Health England recently, um, drawn up what's called the Consensus Statement on Healthy Ageing, which has got 5 commitments in it, and that's been signed by 60 organisations, which does say things like, we commit to trying to reduce inequality in health, we commit to improving housing for health, we commit to trying to ensure that people can contribute really well through volunteering and so on. Huge range of organisations have signed that. So we're trying to sort of raise the level of debate, raise awareness, and also on some really specific things. We've influenced the Chief Medical Officer's advice on physical activity to put strength and balance further up the agenda. Because people don't realise they need to do, well, most people know they should go jogging or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Not sit down all day. A lot of people don't realise that strength and balance is really key to having a good later life. Like just being able to, if you want to be able to, wash and dress yourself and go to the loo when you're 99,
Mm.
then when you're in your 50s, 60s, 70s, you should be doing strength and balance exercises. So we've commissioned some more research on that. We've run a program of activity in local areas about how to get good provision of strength and balance classes and services. So it's across national influencing and some really specific local stuff we've been working.
Great. So, obviously health probably is the number one priority. And then I think a close second, or maybe even a parity to that, of course, is people want to be able to afford to be able to retire, or maybe they don't want to work full time, or they'd like to get to financial independence, but that's a challenge as well. So how do you hope to address those issues?
Well, this is, and you mentioned retiring, and when we quite often get people ringing up the office saying, when should I retire? And because of course the mandatory retirement age is gone now, there isn't one,
No.
apart from for, if you're in the police or, a couple of other jobs. and actually, we kind of say why retire? Because also quite a lot of people do this kind of cliff edge retirement, don't they? They say, okay, I'm going to reach 65 and I'm going to stop working. Absolutely. Quite a lot of people then go back into work because they get terribly bored apart from anything. And, they may have a certain amount of money, but they might want an extra cushion. Work does actually, good work, this is, as you sort of talk about working part time, you choose the flexibility you want, choose the kind of work you want. A large number of people will be happy to do that. And then, of course, with the state pension age going up, a lot of people, myself included, will need to carry on working. So, thinking about it in a positive and a way that about choosing the kind of work you want to do is going to be really important. I mean, there are, obviously, financial advice coming from yourself and colleagues can also be really important because there are other ways of earning money, and there are other ways of being financially secure when you do decide to retire.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, I mean, my big thing there is, and I think you're right in saying that people start to need to think about this type of thing in their 50s, not a couple of years before retirement, or even if they aren't going to retire, there may be one to a choice of whether they've reached to the point where I call financial independence, where they can go, I can choose whether I go to work or not, rather than having to. And I think that's a key that's a key kind of divider, really. And of course, depending on what type of work people are trained and occupy, have got the skills to be able to do. I can imagine if you're just looking outside today, seeing the weather, if you're a roofer, that you may not be wanting to do that in your 80s. You may not be physically capable of doing it. They may not be sat at a desk typing a letter on a computer.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the key thing is, as you kind of implying here, is putting enough into pensions and saving enough throughout your working life, whatever your income is, so that by the time, if you're a roofer and you don't want to get up on the roof anymore, that you feel like you're able to do that and maybe, go and help apprentice roofers and do a bit of teaching, or, do something entirely different. Because you're right, I think, there's this kind of assumption about retirement that it's and financial security and choosing to work for longer or not. It's a very kind of middle class one, isn't it? It's very kind of office based. Whereas every single person in the country needs to save more, to put more into pension pots, and think about the flexible kind of work that is going to be right for them. And obviously, the income that they want for their needs. I mean, nobody, I buy a lottery ticket every now and again, but everybody's got to be realistic, haven't they, about what they're going to be able to afford in later life, depending on what they've put into the pot. If you know that you're going to have 20,000 a year coming in, and that feels like a really pretty good amount, then you've got choices about what you're going to do with that, but you may also decide to do a little bit of extra work to top that up. So I think people are quite realistic. Most people, when I talk to them, or we do surveys, don't actually say they want millions. They say they just want enough to do the things that they've decided are important to them in later life.
Absolutely. And talking about doing things that are important, so you also, I know that one of the key aspects, or key priorities, I think, is connected communities. And a lot of people do get involved in community work or charitable work or what have you. How do you view, in essence, helping policy around that area?
So one of the things that people really love doing is, particularly when they have retired or they've got a bit more time, is volunteering, and as you say, taking part in community activities. Anything from like cleaning up the local canal to helping at the scout group, or there's huge range of things. It's such a surprise in terms of the number of people who already volunteer. I think one of the things that we're trying to do, we've got a grant program at the moment helping 5 different volunteering groups, is for them to find a way to involve more older people, and particularly more people from ethnic minority background and more people who are poorer, because our studies have shown that they would actually benefit more from volunteering, um, but they do it less, because the way that volunteering is set up in lots of charities is quite, sometimes the structure of it is quite formal, and you have to commit to loads of time, and you have to fill in loads of forms, and that really often sort of puts people off. So one of the things that we're trying to do and fund is a model where volunteering becomes a lot more flexible and easy for people to do, that we hope to kind of advise charities and others around the country to scale up. So, I mean, there's very formal volunteering, like being a counsellor, right down to sort of taking your neighbour's bins out, and being, good neighbourliness and helping other people out is also really important. And just participating on all the way up and down that scale is really important for people as they grow older. We find that the quantity and the quality of their relationships is incredibly important for people's life satisfaction.
Absolutely. So if someone was listening to us today and thinking, charitable, working in a community or doing some charity work, etc., sounds like something I'd like to get involved with, but I have no idea of the type of people who maybe want my skills or my efforts or energy, etc. How would you help direct them, do you think?
Well, there's loads of resources out there. So there's a National Council for Volunteering Organisations, NCVO, which has got some signposts on their website. But also, often if you ask kind of friends and family, you find lots of secret volunteers, and they will say, "Oh yeah, in my local area, these are the kinds of things that need volunteers." Often, it's pretty obvious, isn't it? Local library will have lots of information about volunteering. I think one of the things that people forget is the benefit of volunteering to themselves, because people sort of think about it in terms of how can my skills help other people and other organisations, and actually it's a real two-way thing. And there's nothing wrong in thinking, what do I want to get out of it? What do I, so the first port of call really is to ask yourself, what do I really like doing? Because if you love nature and gardening, then that's an obvious place to think about, maybe I could volunteer with a local community garden. If you don't like kids, don't volunteer with the Scouts. You know what I mean? So there are some kind of obvious points about where to start directing your energy, and then there's loads of information out there about how to volunteer.
Great.
The country runs on volunteers. It's really
absolutely. But I was thinking, if you hadn't been involved in that all your life, you haven't been involved in that kind of the world, and coming back to I don't know why I'm picking on roofers this morning, but but if you've been involved in that kind of trade, you might not know exactly where to go to offer your skills out. So some wise advice. Now, I want to touch on your recent book. So When We're 64, Your Guide to a Greater Later Life. Now, have you picked on 64 for a reason, or
in some ways I wish I hadn't, because lots of people have said to me, "Oh, my husband's going to be 64 next year, I'll buy it for him," kind of thing. I think, well, that's great, but it's not just for 64-year-olds. So, I mean, obviously it's a little bit of a take on the Beatles song. And the idea is that it is for people in middle age, because there's a lot we need to do when we're middle-aged to prepare for later life. So it does talk about volunteering and what to do with your time. It talks about health a lot. And it talks about work, and it talks about money, but also one of the first chapters is about ageism and the ageism that exists in society and the ageism that we kind of visit upon ourselves, which is a very odd thing because it's like being prejudiced against your future self, isn't it? If you say, "Oh, I'm going to be too old to travel the world," then you're already limiting what you can do and what you want to do. Or, "Oh yeah, my hip's gone. That's just typical for my age. I'm not going to go to the doctor." Do you know what I mean? It's kind
Yeah.
of you're limiting yourself, and then we get all of these cues from the outside world about older people being, and obviously lots of horrible terms like, old bat or old hag, worse than that. Or old git is a good one, isn't it, for
Yeah.
guys?
Yeah.
And so you're a bit surrounded by ageist language, and then you see that on the telly you don't see that many older women presenting the news, particularly, or in films or in culture. And when you see adverts for jobs, very often the kind of language will be, "We want somebody to join our fresh, young, enthusiastic team," with lots of pictures of young people having around the water cooler. And so both this kind of ageism in the sort of public discourse and in culture has got this sort of vicious circle
Mm-hmm.
where we're ageist about ourselves because we see those images and we listen to that discussion. But we've got, I'm 52. Hopefully I've got, 30, maybe more years. I should stop saying that. I'm going to get run over by a bus tomorrow. And what you're not going to want to spend 30 or 40 years feeling bad about yourself. Nobody's going to want that.
No.
So ageism is something that we've really got to deal with, and I talk about that in the book.
So, Louise, tell me about AgeProud.
Well, AgeProud is we're trying to make it a bit of a social movement, and at the moment it's a hashtag AgeProud, and it's also a commitment that quite a lot of around about 20 local authorities have made to reduce ageism in the way that they talk about older people. And one of the key people who's been pushing the concept of AgeProud is somebody called Joyce Williams, also known as Grandma Williams, who's a blogger in her 80s. She's an absolutely wonderful woman. And she just sort of talks about being proud of being older, enjoying your later life. So it's a commitment to reduce ageism and to really be proud of being old and enjoying it.
Great. So, where do you see that going? Where's next for AgeProud?
I mean, it's one of those things where we would really love people to sign up to use the hashtag for local authorities to become an age-friendly city or community, and we convene that network. And people can look at the Twitter feed and look at the hashtag for upcoming events and what we're hoping to do with it next.
Well, Louise, it's been fantastic chatting to you today. What would be the key message that you'd like our listeners to go away with today?
Okay, two things really, possibly sort of common sense things, but so important, and they are: put more money into your pension and do more for your health in middle age.
Sure. And I think I can touch on the pension thing a little bit. I think pensions are viewed as very, very complicated, I think, by a lot of people, and difficult to understand. And what we really should be talking about is just saving some money for when we're not working. That's really the key. I often talk to people about kind of the only reason you buy a house is that you don't have to pay rent when you're finished work. And because the only people who may benefit from it are probably going to be your children if you have some. So you're really buying a house for them. um, and
Mm,
so that you can live rent free when you finally don't want to be working to pay your rent, if you know what I mean.
mm,
So, and then the other flip side is, save money for that point where you want the choice of whether you choose to work or not.
mhm,
For most people in the most of their lives, to acquire stuff, we need to go to work. If they want to acquire a house or a car or what have you, or even just pay the supermarket bill, we need to go and earn a living. But beyond that, it's then to think, okay, well, everything time we pay ourselves some money, put some money aside for the time when we're not working. That may not be a pension plan. That may be a tax effective way to do it, but it may be just money in the bank. It may be a long term ISA in something. It may whatever it may be, but just put something away at a small amount on a regular basis would be a great thing to do. And of course, actually, if you do have the opportunity to join a pension scheme that your employer runs, or if you're self-employed, start something, take advantage of it. They're well run nowadays. The costs are relatively low, and at the moment they're still very tax incentivized. So yes, I agree with you that uh, yeah, put some money aside for that day where you actually want to get to financial independence, or as I say, just choose whether you go to work or not. Well, I will put lots of information in the show notes. And if you'd like to find out more about the great work that's been done by the Centre of Aging Better and the Age Proud campaign, check out, as I said, the show notes on our website, retirementcafe.co.uk, where you'll find some useful links. If you enjoyed this episode, then please do leave a review on iTunes to help more people like you discover us. It really does help. You can also subscribe via iTunes or your preferred podcast player so you never miss an episode. To see who's coming up next on the podcast, head to the retirementcafe.co.uk upcoming, sorry. As always, please email me with any feedback at hello@theretirementcafe.co.uk. So until next time, this is Justin King, helping you feel more informed in your retirement.